You ever notice how procrastination feels smart in the moment? Like, your brain actually makes a convincing case. You need more research first. Clean your space so you can focus. You'll do better if you wait until you feel ready. And you're sitting there like, yeah, good point. Let's circle back later. But later comes, and you do the exact same thing again and again. So what's really going on? Because here's the thing, you're not stupid. You can tell when you're delaying. You can feel when you're avoiding something. And you still do it anyway. Which means the problem isn't your discipline. It isn't your planning. It isn't your calendar or your to-do list. The problem is that part of you has a different agenda, a quieter one, a sneaky one. And it's running the meeting while you think you're in charge. Carl Jung said it best. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Now, he wasn't talking about procrastination specifically. But, come on, he might as well have been. Because procrastination isn't your schedule failing. It's your psychology negotiating. It's internal friction wearing a disguise. And here's the punchline you're not going to like, but you already know is true. You don't delay tasks. You delay the feelings attached to starting them. So today, we're not doing the cute surface-level tips. We're not downloading another productivity system. We're not pretending motivation is going to magically show up and rescue you. Today, we're talking about the real thing, the internal resistance, the shadow behind the delay, the part of you keep trying to drag into productivity without ever actually introducing yourself to it. And once you finally see it clearly, that's when procrastination stops being your personality and starts being a habit you can realistically break. So stay with me, because if you've ever said, I work better under pressure, or I just need the right mindset to begin, this video is about to call you out, explain you to yourself, and then actually give you a way forward that doesn't collapse after 48 hours. So, if procrastination is really resistance in disguise, and resistance is internal friction wearing a mask, then we need to stop treating this like a time management problem and start treating it like a self-meeting you keep skipping. Because there's someone at the table you're not acknowledging, and until you do, you'll keep losing the same negotiation. You think procrastination is about doing nothing, but it's actually about doing anything other than the thing that threatens your comfort. It's strategic avoidance. It's not random. It's targeted. And the target isn't the task. It's the discomfort behind the task. Carl Jung said, what you resist not only persists, but will grow in size. Look at your own life and tell me that isn't accurate. You put something off for a day, and it feels manageable. You put it off for a week, and now it feels like a reputation risk. A month? Now it feels like a public humiliation waiting to happen. The task didn't change. The psychological weight did. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Resistance multiplies in silence. The more you refuse to look at it, the more convincing it becomes. You're not battling your planner. You're battling the part of you that sees starting as a threat. Think back to a time you told yourself you'd begin at 9 a.m. The clock hits 9 o'clock. And suddenly, your brain is like a defense attorney for delay. You get hit with emotional arguments disguised as logic. You should feel more prepared. You're not in the zone yet. You need momentum first. The wild part? You buy the argument even though you know it's a trap. Jung also said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Procrastination is exactly that. It's not your destiny. It's an internal driver you haven't interrogated. The moment you say, "I'll start when I feel ready," you've already handed the controls to resistance. You're letting a hidden part of you dictate timing. And here's the kicker. The enemy isn't trying to ruin your life. It's trying to avoid something it thinks will hurt you. Judgment, embarrassment, imperfection. Being seen mid-process instead of fully polished. It's not blocking you out of stupidity. It's blocking you out of self-protection. So the goal here isn't be stronger than resistance. That's a pointless arms race. The goal is see resistance so clearly, it loses its ability to impersonate logic. Because the real advantage resistance has over you is not strength, it's anonymity. Once you name it, once you spot it early, once you realize the fear and friction are the meeting itself, not the warning to skip the meeting, the dynamic flips. Procrastination stops feeling like a mysterious force and starts feeling like a pattern you can interrupt in real time. You're not fighting the clock, you're fighting the unnamed. And the moment it's no longer unnamed, it's no longer undefeated. So once you realize procrastination isn't chaos, it's a strategy, the next question becomes way more interesting. Because strategies always have a purpose, even bad ones, even the ones you hate, even the ones that keep you stuck. You think procrastination is self-sabotage, but most of the time it's self-defense. A misplaced one, sure, but defense nonetheless. It's the brain hitting the pause button, not because the task is hard, but because starting feels emotionally risky. Jung said, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." That choice part is the important piece, because procrastination shows up exactly where becoming the next version of you requires vulnerability. Let's break this down realistically. The task you're avoiding? It usually represents a moment where you might not look polished, where someone might have an opinion, where you might not know everything yet, where you might produce something that isn't your best on the first try. And part of you interprets that as danger. Not physical danger, ego danger, reputation danger. What if I fail at this, and now it's proof I'm not as capable as I want to believe I am? So the internal system does something genius and tragic at the same time. It says, we can avoid the threat by avoiding the start. And boom, you scroll, reorganize, plan forever, or mentally warm up without ever stepping into the arena. Jung also warned us, the greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parents. Now, take the metaphorical core of that idea and apply it inward. The greatest burden you carry is the unlived life of the version you keep imagining but never embodying. The potential self, stalled. Not dead, just postponed. For your own safety. Think about the times you delayed something because you wanted it to feel flawless before it began. You weren't waiting for time. You were waiting for shielding. You wanted immunity from criticism, failure, or embarrassment. But that immunity doesn't exist. So instead of protecting your progress, you protected your image, and your progress paid the price. Protection always reveals what you fear losing, and procrastination protects the identity you have now from the identity you're trying to step into. It says, don't start until conditions are perfect, because perfect conditions mean no threat. But perfect conditions never come, and the protection becomes the prison. So procrastination isn't proof you don't care. It's proof you care too much about the wrong thing at the wrong stage. You cared about outcome before you even allowed yourself process. You tried to armor a moment that needed experimentation, not armor. And here's the plot twist that actually changes everything. The part of you that delays is not your enemy. It's your fear manager. It just picked the worst possible method. Avoidance. You don't defeat that part by attacking it. You defeat it by proving to it, through tiny, safe actions, that starting doesn't destroy you. That process isn't exposure, it's practice. That early imperfection isn't evidence, it's a draft. That opinions don't cancel growth, they accompany it. Procrastination isn't the wall, it's the smoke alarm. The fire is your fear of beginning without guarantees. And the moment you understand that, you stop fighting the alarm and start addressing the fire realistically. So now you know procrastination isn't laziness. It's resistance disguised as protection. But here's the problem. Knowing it isn't enough. Awareness alone doesn't move the needle, because resistance is smart. It's patient. It negotiates. And if you want to win, you don't charge in with brute force. You negotiate. Most people treat procrastination like a war to be won. They try to overpower it with willpower, brute discipline, or motivation hacks. And most people fail. Because you're not fighting an enemy. You're negotiating with a part of yourself that's trying to keep you safe. Carl Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." In other words, you don't blast resistance with positivity. You shine a light on it, talk to it, and understand why it's showing up. You make it conscious. You name it. You stop pretending it's random. Here's a concrete example. You sit down to write a report. Resistance hits you like a wall. Your brain whispers, "You're not ready. You don't have all the info. You'll fail." Instead of arguing, you say, "I see you. You're scared I'll fail. I'm doing 10 minutes anyway." You start tiny. You acknowledge the fear. You move anyway. And suddenly, the wall feels like a curtain. Negotiating doesn't mean giving in. It means acknowledging. Saying, "I get that you want to protect me. I hear you. But here's the deal. We'll do it anyway, step by step." Yeah, it's like having a conversation with the part of yourself that slows you down. Not fighting it, not ignoring it. Just setting terms. You'll feel uncomfortable, but we'll start anyway. Micro starts are your weapon here. Tiny, safe actions that are too small for resistance to block. Open the document. Write one sentence. Make the call. Research for 5 minutes. That's it. You're not slaying resistance. You're showing that the cost of obstruction is lower than it imagined. And the fascinating part, once you negotiate this way, procrastination starts losing influence. It's no longer an anonymous force. It's just a cautious voice. A voice you respect, but don't obey. So stop treating procrastination like a battle. Start treating it like a conversation. Name it. Understand it. Set the rules. And then, very importantly, take action anyway. Resistance is smart, but your tiny, deliberate steps are smarter. Because here's the bottom line. You don't crush procrastination. You outsmart it moment by moment until starting becomes routine. And the inner resistance becomes just another voice at the table, not the chairperson. All right, so you've seen that procrastination isn't laziness. It's resistance, it's protection, and it's negotiable. You know now that fighting it head-on is a losing game. But talking to it and understanding it only gets you halfway there. The second half, that's the action. The strategies that actually work in the real world. Not some theory, not motivation fluff. Real, practical moves you can start today. Here's the first thing to understand. Beating procrastination isn't about willpower. It's about identity and context. Carl Jung said, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." Translation: you don't need to feel like the productive person to be the productive person. You act like that version of yourself first, and the feeling eventually follows. You show up, even when your resistance screams, "Not yet." Strategy 1. Micro starts. The 2-minute Trojan horse. Pick a task and shrink it to the smallest possible action. Open the document. Write one sentence. Make one call. Set a single timer. Your resistance can't detect a battle when all you're doing is opening the door. And often, that tiny start snowballs into momentum you didn't think you'd have. Strategy 2. Remove the illusion of the perfect time. Resistance thrives on, "I'll wait for the right moment." The right moment doesn't exist. There's only the moment you agree to act in. Pick a time, stick to it, begin. No excuses. Imperfection doesn't kill progress. Waiting kills it. Strategy 3. Shift focus from outcome to process. Most procrastination is outcome-focused. I need it perfect, or I need it finished. The fix. Focus on just showing up and doing the process. The first draft, the first page, the first 10 minutes. You don't have to produce a masterpiece. You just have to produce something. Strategy 4. Internal negotiation. Keep the conversation going with the resistance. Say, "I see you. I know this feels risky. We're doing 10 minutes. Naming the fear, acknowledging it, and still acting anyway disarms the protective function. Suddenly, procrastination becomes a polite advisory, not a dictator. Here's the key. These aren't hacks. They aren't fancy apps or new planners. They're tiny, deliberate ways to tip the balance in your favor. Because the more you act deliberately in the presence of resistance, the smaller it feels over time, the more it loses its anonymous power. You start proving to yourself that starting doesn't destroy you. That exposure is temporary. That imperfection is part of progress. So, remember, start micro. Pick a moment. Focus on process. Negotiate internally. And repeat. That's how you transform procrastination from a hidden, controlling force into a manageable, predictable habit. The strategy isn't more motivation. It's smarter action. And that's where real change begins. So you've seen how procrastination isn't laziness, how it's protection, and how you can negotiate with it. You've got strategies that work. But here's the final piece, the one most people never see. The secret rule that actually makes all the other strategies stick. Because without it, micro starts, timing hacks, and internal dialogue only last a few days before you slip back into old habits. The secret? You beat procrastination not by increasing pressure, but by reducing emotional load. Sounds simple, right? But it's revolutionary. Most people think the answer is willpower. They try to shove through fear and discomfort with sheer force. And every time, resistance wins. Because emotional friction always outweighs logical argument. Think about it. When you procrastinate, what's really stopping you? Not the task itself. It's the feelings attached to it. Anxiety, self-doubt, fear of judgment, fear of failure, or even just the overwhelm of starting. The trick is to lighten that emotional load so your first step doesn't feel like a mountain. Here's how it works in practice. You don't write the report in one sitting. You start with a single paragraph. You don't clean the whole room before working. You move one object. You don't plan the entire project. You tackle one tiny task. You reduce the emotional stakes so your inner resistance doesn't have an excuse to block you. Carl Jung said, "Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people." Apply that here. Knowing your internal resistance, naming it, understanding it, respecting it, is the fastest way to stop it from running your day. When resistance is conscious, it's powerless to dominate your actions. Let's put it in a real scenario. You've been avoiding a tough conversation or an uncomfortable project. Your chest tightens, your mind spins, you feel stuck. Instead of waiting for motivation or brute force, you take one small action. Draft a single email, write one talking point, set a 5-minute timer to outline ideas. That tiny step shifts the weight from impossible to manageable. Resistance has nowhere to hide. Fear shrinks because you've acted before giving it full power. The punchline: procrastination doesn't end with willpower. It ends when you lower the barrier of emotional friction enough to start anyway. Tiny, deliberate actions, reduced stakes, conscious acknowledgement of your resistance. That's the rule most people miss. So here's the final challenge. Today, pick one task you've been avoiding. Break it into the smallest possible step. Recognize the resistance. Start anyway. That's how procrastination stops being a mysterious force and starts becoming a habit you control. Because in the end, you don't conquer procrastination. You outsmart it, moment by moment, step by step, until the habit of starting is stronger than the habit of delaying. So here's the thing. Procrastination isn't your enemy. It's a mirror. It shows you the parts of yourself you haven't negotiated with, the fears you haven't acknowledged, the perfectionism that's holding you hostage. Once you see it like that, it stops being mysterious. It stops being a personal failure. It becomes something you can work with. Carl Jung said, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." Today, you've been looking inside. You've named the resistance. You've understood the protection. You've learned to negotiate with it and act anyway. That's awakening. And here's the kicker. Change doesn't come in giant leaps. It comes in moments, small starts, deliberate actions. Every time you sit down for 5 minutes, every time you do one tiny task instead of waiting for perfect conditions, you're rewiring your brain, proving to yourself that starting isn't fatal. That imperfection is progress. That fear doesn't get to run the day. So your next step is simple. Pick one thing. Break it into the tiniest possible action. Acknowledge the resistance and just start. Not tomorrow, not later. Right now. One small action. One conscious choice. That's how the invisible force of procrastination starts losing power. Remember, procrastination isn't about laziness. It's about protection, resistance, and the stories we tell ourselves. Once you see it, name it, and outsmart it step by step, you reclaim control. So go on. Start small. Start imperfect. Start anyway, because the habit of starting is the first habit that actually wins.